Under fire. Walker cut loose with his sidearm, the tan trooper squeezing the trigger fast enough that his weapon jumped in his hand. He couldn't tell if he'd hit anything, but when return fire came his way, the round splintering the edges of the bricks near his head, he scooted back behind cover. "Got their attention, Sarge," Walker shouted, gritting his teeth as Rivers tried to patch up his other shoulder. The medic may as well have been in an operating room for all the gunshots and dirt smeared across her forehead and blue cheeks seemed to bother her. "I noticed," Sergeant Brockton shouted, ducking his head as a round spanged off his helmet. The red rifleman blinked, shook his head, and worked the bolt on his weapon. "Well, we don't want those boys thinking they're giving better than they're getting, do we, Kelly?"
"No, sir!"
Kelly roared, the manic glee in her face, the kind that usually sent the rest of the squad ducking for cover. The big green trooper hefted her weapon and wheeled around the half-collapsed wall where she'd been taking cover. When the barrel of her big bore drew level, that was when things got serious. Brockton put his eye back to his scope and started scanning. Anytime someone came up for air or to try to return fire, he squeezed his trigger and worked the bolt as regularly as a metronome. Walker fumbled a spare magazine out of his belt, but Rivers plucked the gun right out of his hand. She reloaded it for him without a word, then jammed a syringe into his wound and squeezed. Walker didn't scream, but it was a near thing. "Is this because I still haven't asked you out?" Walker hissed, taking a shot at movement as someone tried to sneak onto their flank.
"I've had to tear open your shirt and cut you out of your pants more than once,"
Rivers said, her face and hands all business as she tore open a pressure patch and applied it over the wound.
"You get shot one more time, I'm going to consider us married."
Kelly ducked back around cover, the echoes from her barrage fading. Walker shook his head, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. Nobody shot at them. "Sarge?" Walker asked, getting his feet under him as he worked his way into a crouch. "Nobody's moving," Brockton said, scanning his rifle back and forth. "Doesn't mean they won't. Proceed with caution." Walker holstered his sidearm and took up his shotgun. He racked a fresh round into it and readjusted his helmet. He watched as Kelly unslung a fresh belt of bullets and slid them home. Rivers packed up her kit and slung it over her shoulder and picked her rifle back up. Walker nodded. "On my mark," he said, grinning. "Mark." Army Men is a tabletop RPG set in a world of living plastic. Players take on the roles of soldiers within one of the nations of the Plastos Federation, forming a squad that will be deployed to scout the wilds, defend civilian populations, and go in guns blazing against the dangers of the setting. Players choose their character's resin from one of the classic variants, green, gray, red, tan, or blue, and then select one of the game's unique classes like medic, grunt, scout, tactician, or even ordnance. With nearly 24 unique starting backgrounds as well as the exploit system that allows players to truly customize their character's abilities, Army Men provides plenty of fodder for your troopers. Players aren't the only ones getting fresh toys to play with either. Game Masters receive unique tools for creating challenges and setting difficulty, both through expanded tactical rules to provide more battlefield flexibility, but also by eliminating a lot of the bookkeeping you find in traditional RPGs. There's no experience points to track, for example, as players level up after completing a certain number of missions. There's also no gold to track or expenses to follow. Players requisition the gear they need for their missions before deployment, allowing everyone's loadout to be tailored to what they're expecting to encounter. Lastly, players and game masters alike are given a fresh, unusual setting to explore. The nations of the Acetal Alliance, United Polymeria, the Styric Republic, and Acrylica have united against the threat of the Vespoids, huge insectoid creatures that pose a risk to every resinous person in the world if they are not stopped. Even though these nations share a common enemy, though, many of them have bad blood in histories that go back for centuries. So while some missions may go out into the trenches, others may take place in shadowy backrooms and dark alleys frequented by spies or undercover agents. If you're looking for an RPG that will be unlike anything else you've played before, and which is simple enough for new players while providing plenty of fresh challenge for experienced ones, then back Army Men today.